It feels like the end, not just the job, the next 10, 15 years. You're not just losing work, you're losing the version of your life you thought you were heading into. Like someone's taken a pair of shears to that future and just cut it off. It's a single point of failure. You spent decades building a life where the job powers everything, the mortgage, the identity, the routine. When that one part is pulled, the whole dashboard goes dark. In your 50s, you don't just go to work, you inhabit a trajectory. You have a mental spreadsheet that runs all the way to 65. You know when the mortgage is done and what car you'll likely be driving in 3 years. That timeline is the operating system of your life. It's the background process that keeps everything running while you're worrying about the day to day stuff. Then redundancy happens. A headcount formula in an office 300 miles away deletes your row. And because that one specific future is gone, your brain assumes every future's gone. It's like a total network outage. One router fails, and you're convinced the entire internet has ceased to exist. In a steady job, time feels linear, expansive. You have room to breathe because you know what next March looks like. But the moment that structure is removed, your perspective crunches down. Suddenly, your entire life is compressed into the next 48 hours. Every thanks for the interest but email feels like a final verdict of your career. You interpret a single Tuesday of silence as a permanent state of being. It's like looking at a technical drawing where all the layers have been flattened. You can't see the depth anymore. You just see a solid wall. And because you can't see past that wall, your brain starts working overtime to find a way through it. That's why you feel so drained. You're trying to run a high demand application on a processor that's overheated. You don't have the RAM left to think about next month. You aren't broken, you're just redlining. There's a specific grumpiness that comes from living with a ghost. The ghost is the you that should have been in the project update this morning, the you that was supposed to be signing off the schedule or sorting that inventory issue. You're still trying to run the old software on a machine disconnected from the server. You wake up at 7 a.m. with your heart racing because your internal clock is still geared for a commute that doesn't exist. You're hunting, but you aren't finished. You're uncoupled. You're a high torque engine sitting on a pallet in a warehouse. You've got the power, the components are in working order, but there's no drive shaft connected to the wheels. It's easy to look at that engine and think it's scrap metal because it isn't moving anything. The problem is the job market makes that warehouse feel like a scrapyard. When you're out of the loop, you notice a shift in how the world interacts with you. There's a very clinical way this gets handled. It's not that people are unkind, they just don't know where to file you anymore. You'll move from being a known quantity, a production lead or an accounts manager, to being a variable. And in our culture, when people don't know the category, they default to a polite, distant silence. It's kind of a social cooling that we mistake for a lack of interest, or worse, a sign that we've become legacy data. Inside the company, the world moved in hours. Outside, for us, the structural interval is measured in months. One of the hardest things is to stop seeing this end as your fault. If the company hadn't restructured, you'd still be there doing a good job. Your competence hasn't changed. Your IQ hasn't dropped 10 points since you handed in your security pass. The finality you feel isn't a reflection of your ability, it's a reflection of a structural repositioning. Think of it like a chassis with the bodywork removed for restoration. The engine, your 30 years of experience, and your ability to tell when someone is talking rubbish is still there. It just doesn't have a dashboard to report to right now. The end was the end of a contract, not the person holding it. This is where we move from seeking solutions to practicing containment. Containment is the ability to look at that grey fog and say, I don't know what next year looks like, but I know how to handle this Wednesday. If the timeline has collapsed, stop trying to rebuild it today. You can't. Instead, focus on the mechanical integrity of your week. The walk in the morning, the one project you're tinkering with, the one conversation that isn't about finding work. The constant need to justify your Tuesday afternoons just stops. You're not finished. You're just between projects. And in our world, the time between projects is often when the best maintenance happens. Society tells us that if we aren't climbing, we're falling. It's a persuasive lie backed up by the silence of your inbox. But look at the hardware. You have decades of stress tested experience. You've seen how systems break and how projects actually get delivered when the chips are down. That isn't legacy data. That's high value firmware. The finality you feel is just the shock of being disconnected from a power source that was never really yours. You weren't the power. The company was the socket. Feels like the end only because we've been trained to think there's only one type of socket in the wall. Redundancy feels final because it kills a version of the future we were comfortable with. But a collapsed timeline isn't a collapsed life, it's a narrative trick. You're someone with over 3 decades of leverage waiting for the noise of a changing system to stop so you can see the road again. The silence you're feeling isn't a sign that you're finished, it's just the sound of the old system switching off. The shears only cut the paper, they didn't cut the person. The system might have decommissioned the role, but it can't decommission you. The end is just a transition that hasn't found its new name yet. I'll see you in the next one.